10 British royals, 10 strange hungers, 10 lives that prove a crown can't cure what the heart refuses to heal. From a king who couldn't stop eating his future, to a queen obsessed with her own reflection. From a prince who drowned himself in wine and mirrors, to a monarch who believed only fire could wash away her guilt. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtains on some of history's strangest royal addictions, the ones whispered about in palace corridors and buried in secret letters. Before we slip into these stories, hit subscribe so you never miss our deep dives into history's darkest corners. And while you're here, drop a comment below. Where are you right now? And what time is it? Late night in London? Or midnight in Manhattan? Now let's step inside the palace to find out what 10 of Britain's most powerful rulers were actually addicted to. Picture this. It's 3 in the morning in a London palace, and a prince is standing in front of a mirror, smearing white paste all over his face. Again, the paste is made of lead. Yes, the toxic metal. It burns his skin, but George doesn't care. He needs to cover every wrinkle, every flaw, every sign that he's aging. Behind him, 17 more mirrors. On the table sits a brown bottle of laudanum, opium mixed with alcohol, basically getting drunk and high at the same time. He'll drink it in exactly 14 minutes. Not 13, not 15, always 14. It's the only way he can sleep. And down the hall, a full place setting laid out at the dinner table. Plate, fork, knife, wine glass. It's been set like this every night for 3 years. The woman it's meant for isn't coming. She hasn't come in years. The man is setting a table for a ghost. Welcome to the life of King George IV, whose addictions went way beyond wine and food. This is a prince who became so obsessed with his own image that he lost his mind trying to control it. Mirrors, makeup, medicine, and make-believe. And it only gets stranger from here. The year is 1762, and baby George is born as the eldest son of King George III, which means he'll be king someday, and his life is planned before he can walk. His father runs the palace like a military academy. Every mistake gets written down, every flaw must be fixed. Love comes with conditions. Be perfect or be disappointing. George's response? He rebels. Hard. By the time he gets to his 20s in the 1780s, George is living his hot mess era. Drinking, gambling, racking up astronomical debts. But George doesn't just party, he performs. He hires designers for elaborate party decorations. He commissions furniture designed to make him look thinner. He positions mirrors at specific angles to catch his best side. The man is basically inventing Instagram, except instead of filters, he's using lead-based makeup and strategic lighting. London starts whispering, not just about his debts or expanding waistline, but something weirder. The prince is obsessed with mirrors. Servants find him at 2 in the morning, adjusting his neck scarf for an hour straight. He spends 45 minutes arranging a single curl. Then he flies into rages and orders mirrors removed, only to demand them back the next morning. It's not normal. It's compulsive. It's genuinely concerning. Then, in 1785, George falls desperately in love. Her name is Maria Fitzherbert. She's older, twice widowed, and here's the killer. She's a Catholic. In 1785, there's a law saying the heir to the throne cannot marry a Catholic. It's literally illegal. George's response? Watch me. He writes desperate letters threatening to stab himself if she won't marry him. Then he actually does stab himself. Not fatally, just enough to prove he's serious. Absolutely unhinged behavior. They marry in secret in December 1785. The marriage isn't legally valid, but George doesn't care. He moves Maria close by and has servants set her place at dinner every night, even when she's not there, even when she's across town. Years later, they separate. She's living her own life. They barely speak. But that dinner place setting still appears every single night. The servants realize it's deeply, deeply weird. But you don't argue with royalty. George ages, his addictions multiply. The drinking escalates, bottles of port before breakfast, brandy with lunch, sweet wine in the afternoon, more brandy at dinner, then laudanum to sleep. He's ending every day drunk and high simultaneously. This is routine, and the eating becomes legendary. George sits alone working through 8-course meals. Just him, nobody else. Roasted meats in rich sauces, elaborate pies, multiple desserts, mountains of cheese. Then more dessert. His doctors beg him to stop. "Your Highness, you're killing yourself." George's response? He commissions paintings showing him with a 32-inch waist. His real waist? Almost 50 inches and growing. The man is having artists paint him thin while eating himself into an early grave. The denial is spectacular. But wait, it gets weirder. George designs elaborate military uniforms dripping with gold braid and medals he never earned. He commissions heroic portraits wearing these uniforms, looking battle-ready. Has George ever fought in a battle? Nope. Does he own 17 custom military uniforms anyway? Absolutely. In 1811, his father, King George III, loses his mind completely, and George becomes Prince Regent, basically temporary king. Finally, he has real power. What does he do? He turns the monarchy into his personal theatre production. More ridiculous paintings get commissioned. One shows him on horseback, even though George now needs a mechanical hoist just to get into a carriage. He physically cannot mount a horse, but the painting shows him as an athletic god. The mirrors multiply. Over 50 mirrors in his private chambers. 50, all positioned so he sees himself from every angle constantly. But London's caricature artists, the political cartoonists of the 1800s, start absolutely roasting him. They draw George as a whale in a waistcoat, as a mountain of flesh in military costume. One famous cartoon calls him the Prince of Wales. Not Wales, the country to the west of England, but Wales as in the massive marine animal, because British humour loves puns. These prints sell everywhere. They're the viral memes of 1812. George sees them. In public, he laughs. In private, he sends servants to buy every copy and burn them. One night, a new caricature appears that's different. It doesn't show George as a whale or joke. It shows him as pathetic, desperate, alone, too close to truth. George stares at it for a long time. Then he orders all mirrors in the east wing covered with black cloth. He never explains why. Nobody asks questions. In 1820, his father dies. George becomes king. Finally, you'd think this would be triumph. Instead, George retreats. The parties stop. He withdraws behind heavy curtains that block light and muffle sound. His rooms become tombs where he shuffles in a laudanum fog, avoiding mirrors, avoiding people, avoiding reality. But the eating continues. Doctors warn his heart is failing. He orders richer sauces. They warn the laudanum is killing him. He increases the dose. They beg him to move. He has himself carried in a chair because walking is too painful. And Maria's place setting still appears every night, even though she hasn't spoken to him in years. The servants wonder, does he even remember why? Or has the habit become the only real thing left? By the late 1820s, George's body gives up. His heart can barely pump blood. His liver is diseased. His kidneys are failing. His legs are so swollen he can't stand. On June 26, 1830, King George IV dies at Windsor Castle. He's 67, though his body looks ancient. The autopsy is brutal. Severely enlarged heart. destroyed liver and kidneys, decades of alcohol and opium abuse. His stomach so distended they have to drain it manually. When servants go through his rooms, they find the mirrors, some covered with black cloth, some turned to walls, some smashed. On his desk sits his diary, open to the last entry. A single line about the weather, nothing about regrets, nothing about Maria, nothing about the life he lived. Just whether it might rain. Here's the thing about George IV. He had everything. Wealth beyond imagination, power over an empire, beautiful palaces, the finest food and wine in the world. But he was addicted to something impossible, controlling how people saw him. He could commission 1,000 portraits. He could fill rooms with perfectly angled mirrors. He could paint his face with toxic makeup and set tables for ghosts. But he couldn't control the truth. The mirrors are still there in palace rooms that are now museums. Silent witnesses to a man who spent his life performing for an audience that stopped believing years ago. And those mirrors still hold George's unanswered question. What did he really see in his own reflection? And why, in the end, did he cover them all up? And if you think setting tables for ghosts is disturbing, we're about to travel back nearly 3 centuries to meet a queen whose addiction was far more lethal. She didn't collect mirrors or stage performances. She collected souls and believed only fire could save them. The smoke from her choices would darken England's skies for years. And that's only the beginning. If you're still here, eyes wide, maybe a little disturbed, you're exactly our kind of viewer. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss what's still lurking down this royal rabbit hole. And tell us in the comments, where are you tuning in from and what time is it where you are? Are you listening in the midst of midnight in Mumbai or winding down at twilight in Toronto? Wherever you are, we're right here with you. Number 2, Queen Mary I, the queen who burned for redemption. Listen, do you hear that? The soft clicking sound echoing through Whitehall Palace, rosary beads, moving through calloused fingers, one prayer after another after another. A woman kneels on cold stone, her knees raw from hours of devotion. She's been here since midnight, and dawn is still hours away. This is Queen Mary I of England, and she's not praying for peace or wisdom. She's praying for permission to light more fires. Welcome to the story of a woman whose addiction wasn't to wine or opium or vanity. It was to punishment, correction, and the belief that only holy fire could cleanse a nation's soul. Before we get to the burning part, and trust me, we're absolutely getting there, we need to understand how Mary ended up this way. Because nobody is born thinking, you know what would fix this country? More fire. Mary's story starts with the world's worst father, Henry VIII, the Tudor king who would eventually have 6 wives, 2 of whom he'd execute. Not exactly Father of the Year material. Mary is born in 1516 to Henry and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. For 11 years, life is perfect. She's the princess, beloved and adored. Then her father decides he needs a son. It becomes an obsession. Catherine keeps having miscarriages. Henry wants a divorce so he can try again with someone else. But the Catholic Church doesn't allow divorce. The Pope says absolutely not. Henry's response? Fine. I'll make my own church. He literally breaks England away from the Catholic Church, declares himself head of a new Church of England, grants himself a divorce, and marries his mistress Anne Boleyn. This splits England into 2 camps, Catholics who think Henry is a heretic, and Protestants who support the new church. This religious divide will define British politics for centuries, and 17-year-old Mary is caught directly in the middle. Henry declares Mary illegitimate. A bastard. Servants who once bowed now ignore her. She's forbidden from seeing her mother, who dies 3 years later, alone and heartbroken. Mary is devastated, rejected by her father and half the country. The Catholic faith becomes the only thing she has left. It's her identity, her inheritance, her connection to her mother. She doesn't just believe in Catholicism. She clings to it like a drowning person clings to driftwood. This is where the addiction starts. Not to a substance, but to an idea. If England returns to the true faith, everything will be okay. Her mother's suffering will have meaning. Her father's betrayal will be undone. It's not rational, but grief rarely is. Years pass. Henry dies in 1547, massively obese and possibly insane. Mary's 9-year-old Protestant half-brother becomes King Edward VI. Then, in 1553, Edward dies at 15. Suddenly, Mary becomes queen at age 37. Her mission: bring England back to the Catholic Church. Back to Rome. Back to the religion her mother died for. At first it seems reasonable. She attends Mass daily. Most people shrug and go along with it. Then comes January 1554 and Wyatt's rebellion. Thousands of English Protestants rise up against Mary's plan to marry Philip II of Spain. They march on London demanding she stay single and keep England Protestant. Mary's forces crush the rebellion. The leaders are executed. And something inside her hardens. If her people won't accept salvation willingly, she'll force them. July 1554. Mary marries Philip of Spain. She's 38. He's 27. She's desperately, embarrassingly in love with him. Philip is handsome and devout, but he's managing a massive empire. England is just one piece on his political chessboard. He's rarely in the country. Mary waits for him constantly. She writes letters. She watches the river for ships. Her ladies-in-waiting feel deeply uncomfortable watching their queen pine after a man who clearly doesn't feel the same way. It's awkward for everyone. Late 1554. England officially reconciles with the Catholic Church, and heresy laws return. Here's what that means. If you're caught being Protestant in Catholic England, you can be arrested, tried, and burned at the stake. February 1555. John Rogers, a Protestant minister, becomes the first victim. He's burned alive at Smithfield in front of a crowd. Mary is in her private chapel, praying through the entire execution, rosary beads clicking through her fingers, over and over. Then the next burning happens, and the next. Over 3 years, nearly 300 people are burned alive for refusing to convert to Catholicism. And Mary personally approves every single warrant. This isn't just policy anymore. This is compulsion. Mary's ladies-in-waiting find the Queen in her chapel at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, kneeling in the dark, lips moving in constant prayer, rosary beads worn smooth from endless use. She attends Mass every morning without exception. Confession sessions stretch into hours. Her priests report she confesses the same sins repeatedly, circling back to the same fears. She can't sleep without completing specific prayer rituals in exact order. If interrupted, she starts over from the beginning. The palace transforms into a shrine. Incense in every room, crucifixes on every wall. Servants whisper that the Queen barely eats, that she wears a hair shirt under her gowns, rough fabric deliberately scratching her skin as penance. The pattern is clear. Pray, approve execution warrants. Pray more, approve more warrants. The cycle never stops. In Mary's mind, the prayers and the fires are both forms of salvation. She's performing a compulsive ritual she genuinely believes will save England's soul. It's religious OCD scaled to national policy, except people are dying. Then, in late 1554, Mary announces she's pregnant. Finally, an heir. Proof that God approves of her reign. The country prepares. Cradles are commissioned. Mary's belly swells. She reports feeling the baby move. She plans the christening, chooses names, imagines her child's face. Months pass. The due date comes and goes. No baby. Summer 1555. Still no baby. Slowly, horribly, everyone realizes the truth. There is no baby. There never was. Modern historians think it was either a phantom pregnancy brought on by desperate psychological need, or possibly a tumor. The unused cradle sits in Mary's apartments for months, covered in white cloth. Her father rejected her. Her people rebelled. Her husband ghosts her. Now her own body has betrayed her, and the fires keep burning. It's 1557. Mary believes she's pregnant again. Philip briefly returns. By early 1558, it's clear. No baby. Again. Philip leaves England in July 1558. He will never return. Mary is dying, probably from ovarian cancer. She's in increasing pain, increasingly isolated, increasingly desperate. The executions continue right up until the end. And in her chapel, Mary kneels in the darkness, rosary beads clicking like a metronome. What is she praying for at this point? Or is she just praying because stopping would mean facing the silence? November 17th, 1558. Mary Tudor dies at St. James's Palace. She's 42. She dies without an heir, without her husband, without the Catholic England she tried desperately to save. Within hours, her half-sister Elizabeth inherits the throne and immediately reverses Mary's religious policies. Within months, England is Protestant again. Every single thing Mary fought for is undone. All that remains is a nickname. Bloody Mary. Here's the genuine tragedy of Mary Tudor. She wasn't a monster. She was a traumatized woman who genuinely believed she was saving souls. In her worldview, burning heretics wasn't cruelty. It was mercy. A few moments of earthly pain to save someone from eternal damnation. But when personal trauma meets absolute power, mercy becomes the first casualty. Mary spent her life being rejected. Somewhere along the way, she confused punishment with love. She tried to force England to believe what she believed, and when they wouldn't, she lit the fires and called it compassion. Prayer became her drug. Ritual became her escape. Fire became her medicine for a wound that would never heal. Mary's addiction wasn't really to religion. It was to control. To the belief that if she just prayed hard enough, punished severely enough, she could make the world bend to her will. But the world doesn't work that way, and neither do people. The woman who tried to save England's soul with fire leaves behind a half-sister who learned the opposite lesson, that survival means never letting anyone see what you really believe. Number 3. Queen Elizabeth I, the queen who couldn't stop performing. A portrait painter watches nervously as the Queen examines his work. He's painted her exactly as she looks, 53 years old, lines around her eyes, thinning hair beneath her wig. Elizabeth stares at the canvas in silence. Then she orders it burned. "Paint me as I was," she says, "not as I am." The painter starts again. This time, he'll paint her at 25. Like always. Welcome to Queen Elizabeth I, whose addiction wasn't wine or opium. It was the performance itself. The mask that never comes off. The slow, toxic erasure of the woman beneath the crown. And the terrifying part? She eventually forgot there was anyone underneath. Elizabeth is born in 1533 to King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. Her father wanted a son. He got a daughter. When Elizabeth is 2 years old, her father has her mother beheaded. Then he declares Elizabeth a bastard and strips her of her royal title. One day she's a princess. The next day she's nobody. Elizabeth learns something crucial at age 2. Love vanishes instantly, and survival means hiding your real self. So she studies people. She learns to smile without revealing anything, to speak without saying what she thinks, to perform perfectly. The real Elizabeth stays buried. Only the performance is safe. In 1558, Elizabeth becomes queen at 25. There's just one problem. She's a woman in a world that believes women can't rule. Every advisor assumes she'll marry quickly and hand power to a husband. Elizabeth's response? Watch this. She turns her coronation into pure theatre, stops to talk with commoners, gives speeches that make people weep. The crowds go wild. And Elizabeth realizes, if she controls the image, she controls the kingdom. The portraits start immediately. Elizabeth obsesses over every detail, the angle of her head, the light on her face. Every official portrait must show her young, radiant, ageless. In real life, she's aging normally. In the portraits, frozen at 25 forever. Then she does something brilliant and disturbing. She has the same portrait copied dozens of times and sent across England. It's basically Instagram filters, except permanent and distributed nationally. Everywhere her subjects look, they see the same perfect, ageless queen. She's created a visual empire built on illusion. But illusion requires maintenance, and that's where it gets dark. The white makeup Elizabeth wears is called ceruse. It's made from white lead mixed with vinegar. White lead, the toxic metal that's slowly poisoning her. Rich women love it because it creates that deathly pale look that screams wealth. Tan skin means you're a peasant working outdoors. Ghost white skin means you're too important to see sunlight. But here's the trap. White lead burns your skin. It scars it. It damages it permanently. And the more you use it, the worse the damage gets, which means you need more makeup to cover yesterday's damage, which causes more damage today. It's a vicious cycle with no exit. Once you start, stopping means revealing the destroyed skin underneath. Elizabeth is trapped. Every morning she applies the white paste to her face. Every morning it burns. Every morning her skin dies a little more beneath the mask. Her ladies-in-waiting watch in horror, but nobody dares say anything. The performance demands perfection. Then there are the wigs. Elizabeth's natural hair starts thinning from stress, illness, and possibly the lead poisoning itself. So she starts wearing wigs. First occasionally, then constantly. By her 40s, Elizabeth owns over 80 wigs. 80. She rotates through them like costumes, choosing the perfect one for each public appearance. But she can never let anyone see her without one, because if people see the real woman with thinning grey hair and poisoned skin, the illusion shatters. And the illusion is all she has. Now let's talk about the men. Because Elizabeth's manipulation of her suitors is genuinely spectacular. Everyone wants her to marry. Her advisors beg. Parliament demands. Foreign kings propose. Elizabeth flirts with everyone and commits to no one. Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, her childhood friend. She keeps him close for decades, gives him gifts, makes him think he's special. He proposes. She says maybe. This goes on for years. He finally marries someone else out of frustration. Elizabeth is furious. How dare he move on from a relationship she never committed to? It's masterful gaslighting. Then there's Francois, Duke of Anjou. He's 20 years younger than her. She calls him her frog. Wears his ring. Writes him love letters. He thinks they're getting married. Then, at the last moment, Elizabeth backs out. She weeps dramatically, says her heart is breaking, claims duty prevents their union. Francois goes home humiliated. Elizabeth keeps all the political advantages she negotiated. Was any of it real? Or was the entire relationship just another performance? At this point, even Elizabeth might not know anymore. Courtiers notice something strange. The queen barely sleeps. Her ladies find her awake at 3 in the morning, pacing, muttering to herself. Some whisper she talks to empty rooms as if addressing an invisible court, as if she can't turn off the performance anymore, even when she's alone. The line between Elizabeth the person and Elizabeth the performance is dissolving. And the terrifying question, is there still a person underneath, or has the performance consumed her completely? By the 1590s, Elizabeth is in her 60s. The damage is impossible to hide. Her teeth are black and rotting from sugar. Some have fallen out completely. Her skin is scarred and damaged from decades of lead poisoning. Her real hair is nearly gone. But the official portraits still show her at 25. Perfect. Radiant. And she demands it. She literally makes it illegal to paint her looking old. She's trying to Photoshop reality itself, to legislate away aging. And disturbingly, it works. Most people never see her in person. They only know portrait Elizabeth. The illusion. The real woman has disappeared. In 1588, England defeats the Spanish Armada, Elizabeth's greatest triumph. She addresses her troops at Tilbury. "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king." The soldiers roar. The speech becomes legend. The performance is perfect. For one moment, the illusion becomes truth. But after the Armada, everything declines. Her last favourite, the Earl of Essex, rebels against her. She's forced to have him executed. After his death, something breaks in Elizabeth. But she keeps performing, keeps applying the poison, keeps wearing the wigs, because stopping means admitting it was all a lie. There's a rumour that she ordered all mirrors removed from her chambers, that she couldn't bear seeing her real reflection anymore. Whether true or not, everyone believed it, because they understood. The Queen lives inside the performance. Reality is her enemy. March 1603. Elizabeth is 70 and dying. Her doctors beg her to go to bed. She refuses. Because lying down means surrender, means admitting weakness, means the performance is over. So she stands for hours, trembling, staring at nothing. Servants find her like this day after day, performing when there's no audience left. On March 24th, 1603, Elizabeth dies at Richmond Palace. After 70 years of constant performance, the show finally ends. Elizabeth was brilliant. She kept England stable for 45 years, defeated the Spanish Armada, presided over a golden age. But somewhere along the way, she stopped being a person who performed and became a performance pretending to be a person. She could commission 1,000 portraits, own 80 wigs, cover her face in poison every morning. But she couldn't stop time, couldn't make the illusion real, couldn't step off the stage she built. The lead poisoning killed her skin. But the performance killed something deeper, the woman she might have been, if she'd ever felt safe enough to be real. The Queen who ruled through illusion leaves behind a haunting question. Who was the real Elizabeth? Did she even know anymore? But we don't have time to answer that, because waiting in the shadows is a king whose addiction makes Elizabeth's performance look restrained. A man who didn't perform pleasure, he drowned in it. Who spent 60 years waiting for a crown he'd already outgrown. Number 4. Edward VII, the king who couldn't stop escaping. A servant enters the king's private dining room at Buckingham Palace and stops dead. The king is alone. Again, eating his way through an 8-course meal meant for 6 people. Oysters, turtle soup, salmon in butter sauce, roasted duck, venison, pheasant, 3 different desserts, a cheese course, more desserts. It's been 2 hours. He's still going. The servant notices something else. On the table beside the king sits a silver cigarette case. The king has smoked 12 cigars during dinner. 12, during one meal. alone. And here's the disturbing part. The king has done this every single night for 40 years. Welcome to Edward VII, whose addictions were so consuming that even becoming king couldn't slow them down. A man who filled 60 years of waiting with compulsive rituals of escape that would eventually kill him. And the strangest part, he literally couldn't stop even when his doctors told him he was dying. The year is 1841, and baby Albert Edward, nicknamed Bertie, is born as the eldest son of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. His father designs an education program so rigid that Bertie's tutors worry it will break the child's mind. Lessons from 7 a.m. until 10 p.m. every single day. Every mistake written down, every failure analyzed. Young Bertie learns something crucial. He will never be good enough. Ever. Then, in 1861, when Bertie is 20, his fellow officers sneak an actress into his tent during military training. Word gets back to his parents. Prince Albert travels through miserable weather to confront Bertie. He returns home feverish and dies within 2 weeks from typhoid fever. Queen Victoria blames Bertie. She believes the stress of the scandal killed Albert. For the next 40 years, Victoria keeps Bertie completely shut out from real power. He's the heir to the throne, but she treats him like a naughty child. No state documents, no real responsibilities, just waiting. And so the addictions begin. Let's start with the gambling, because Bertie's gambling isn't social. It's compulsive and disturbing. He gambles every single night. Monte Carlo, private clubs in London, country house parties, anywhere there are cards and stakes. And here's the weird part. Bertie is terrible at gambling. He loses constantly. His friends have to cover his massive debts regularly. But he can't stop. His friends notice that when Bertie gambles, he enters a strange trance state. His eyes glaze over. He barely speaks. He's completely disconnected from reality. It's not about winning. It's about those hours when he doesn't have to think about waiting, about his mother's rejection, about being blamed for his father's death. Now the eating, and this is where it gets genuinely shocking. A typical Bertie meal, 12 courses minimum. Oysters, multiple soups, fish courses, meat courses, game birds, multiple desserts, cheese, more desserts, fruit. But here's what makes it strange. He eats alone. Constantly. Even at parties with hundreds of guests, Bertie often eats privately first, consuming a full meal, then appears at the official dinner and eats again. His staff whisper about finding him at midnight, working through cold roast beef and entire fruit pies by himself in dimly lit rooms. And he has specific timing rituals. Meals must start at exact times. If delayed by even 15 minutes, he becomes genuinely agitated. By his 40s, Bertie's waistline is approaching 50 inches. He needs special furniture built to support his weight. His response? He commissions portraits showing him thin and athletic. The denial is spectacular. But he physically cannot stop eating, even when he's not hungry, even when he's in pain from overeating. Then there are the cigars, and this detail is genuinely disturbing. Bertie smokes between 20 and 30 cigars every single day. But it's not casual smoking. He has developed rigid smoking rituals. First cigar at 8 a.m. with breakfast. One every hour throughout the day. Multiple cigars during meals. Cigars before bed. If something disrupts the schedule, he becomes visibly anxious. His hands shake. He paces. Staff report finding ashtrays in his private rooms with 7 or 8 cigars stubbed out half-smoked, as if he lit them compulsively, then forgot about them. His doctors warn that chronic bronchitis is destroying his lungs. He lights another cigar during the medical consultation. They warn that his heart cannot handle the strain. He blows smoke in their faces and laughs. The man is literally smoking himself to death and cannot stop. And then there are the mistresses, and this is where Bertie's compulsions get genuinely scandalous. Lily Langtry, the famous actress, becomes so publicly linked to him that society nicknames her the Jersey Lily and treats her like unofficial royalty. Bertie sets her up in a house, showers her with jewels, and visits on a rigid schedule. Then there's Daisy Greville, Countess of Warwick. When she tries to blackmail him decades later by threatening to publish his love letters, Bertie has to involve lawyers and the royal family to buy back his own intimate, compromising correspondence. Alice Keppel becomes his favourite mistress for the last decade of his life. And here's what's genuinely shocking. His wife, Princess Alexandra, allows Alice to visit Bertie on his deathbed. His actual wife invites his mistress to say goodbye because everyone has just accepted this is who Bertie is. But the rumours get darker. Whispers spread about Bertie's visits to the most exclusive Parisian brothels. At Le Chabanais, one of Paris's finest establishments, staff whisper about special furniture. A siège d'amour, a love chair, supposedly designed to accommodate his substantial weight during encounters with multiple women. Whether the chair was built specifically for him or simply existed at a brothel he frequented, nobody can say for certain. But everyone believes the stories. And in 1870, something unprecedented happens. Bertie is called to testify in divorce court in the Mordaunt case. The heir to the British throne, sitting in a witness box, being cross-examined about allegations of adultery. He's not having affairs. He's operating a rotation system. Staff whisper about which mistress visits which palace on which day. It's compulsive, mechanical, insatiable, and his wife knows everything. Everyone knows. Newspapers hint, cartoonists mock, foreign courts gossip. It's humiliating and devastatingly public. But Bertie cannot stop. The compulsion to escape into female attention is stronger than shame, stronger than loyalty, stronger than survival itself. The years crawl by. Bertie turns 30, then 40, then 50, still waiting for his mother to die. The addictions intensify. More food, more cigars, more gambling, more women, more of everything. He's not living. He's filling time, desperately, compulsively. Finally, January the 22nd, 1901, Queen Victoria dies at age 81. Bertie is 59 years old. He becomes King Edward VII, and here's what's genuinely tragic. He's actually good at being king. But the addictions don't stop. They accelerate. As king, Bertie's compulsive behaviors intensify to genuinely alarming levels. He's now eating 5 massive meals a day. Breakfast, second breakfast, lunch, tea, dinner. Each one a multi-course feast. He's smoking up to 40 cigars daily. His valets report his clothes reek of tobacco so badly they can barely enter his chambers. He travels frantically between London, Balmoral, Paris, Monte Carlo, never staying anywhere more than a few days, always moving, running. His doctors issue increasingly desperate warnings. His heart is failing. His bronchitis is chronic. They beg him to rest. He books another trip. They plead with him to stop smoking. He lights 3 cigars simultaneously. They warn he's killing himself. He orders another 8-course meal. Staff report finding the king alone at 2 a.m., sitting in dark rooms, cigar burning down to ash in his hand, staring at nothing. He jokes constantly that sleep is for the dead, but his eyes carry exhaustion so deep it looks like grief. Because here's the truth. Even becoming king didn't fix it. The crown didn't fill the void. 60 years of being told he wasn't good enough. 60 years of waiting. 60 years of his mother's rejection. And so he escapes. Into everything. Anything. All at once. Because stopping means feeling. And feeling means remembering. May 6, 1910. King Edward VII collapses at Buckingham Palace. His heart, strained by decades of compulsive indulgence, finally fails. He's 68. Even on his deathbed, surrounded by doctors, he asks for a cigar. They refuse. For the first time in his life, someone actually stops him. He dies that evening. Here's what nobody said at Edward VII's funeral. This man wasn't addicted to food, cigars, gambling, or women. He was addicted to not feeling. Every cigar was a ritual to mark time passing. Every meal was an attempt to fill a void that had nothing to do with hunger. Every gambling session was a trance state to escape consciousness. The tragedy isn't that Edward VII had addictions. The tragedy is that he spent 60 years using them to run from a pain that was never his fault in the first place. His parents broke him, and he spent the rest of his life trying to escape the pieces. But if you think a king escaping into compulsive pleasure is disturbing, brace yourself, because we're about to meet a Tudor whose appetite didn't just destroy himself. It devoured 6 wives, broke from Rome, and reshaped an entire kingdom. A man who genuinely believed his hunger was God's will. That king's appetite would quite literally eat the future. Number 5, King Henry VIII, the king who ate the future. How many wives does it take before you realize you're not looking for love, you're feeding an addiction? For Henry VIII, the answer was 6. 6 wives, 60 palaces, thousands of deaths, and one kingdom torn apart because a man couldn't stop consuming everything in reach. This isn't a love story. This is a case study in what happens when unchecked appetite becomes national policy. The year is 1491, and baby Henry is born as the second son, which in royal families means you're the backup. Your older brother gets the throne, you get music lessons. Then in 1502, Arthur dies suddenly at 15. 11-year-old Henry becomes the heir, and everything changes overnight. By 1509, Henry's father dies, and 18-year-old Henry becomes king. The entire country basically swoons. He's 6'2", red gold hair, athletic, charming. After years of his father's paranoid rule, here comes this gorgeous young king who loves parties and tournaments. He marries Catherine of Aragon, a Spanish princess. At first, it's genuinely romantic. The people call him the perfect king. But Henry has one fear that will destroy everything: dying without a son. Here's why this matters. In Henry's world, women can't safely inherit the throne. If Henry dies with only a daughter, England risks civil war. Catherine gets pregnant. Miscarriage. Pregnant again. The baby dies. Another pregnancy. Another loss. This happens over and over for years. Finally, in 1516, a healthy baby arrives. A girl. Mary. Henry loves his daughter, but she can't secure his dynasty. So they keep trying. More pregnancies, more heartbreak. And with each failure, the addictions begin. It starts with food, and it's disturbing from the start. Servants find Henry alone after banquets end, sitting in dark rooms, methodically working through platters of cold meat, entire pies, wheels of cheese. Just him. Alone. Eating compulsively. It's not about hunger. It's about filling an emptiness that food can't actually fill. His waistline expands. Then he starts hoarding everything. By the end of his life, Henry owns 60 royal residences. 60. That's not collecting property. That's compulsive hoarding on a national scale. He fills rooms with tapestries, artwork, suits of armor, weapons, jewels. Mountains of possessions. None of it enough. Then, in 1524, a jousting accident crushes his leg. The wound heals badly. Another accident in 1536 tears it open again, and this time it never heals. For 11 years, Henry lives with an open, festering wound that constantly oozes and stinks. The smell becomes so bad that people can tell when Henry is approaching before they see him. The stench of rotting flesh announces the king. The pain makes everything worse. His temper explodes, his appetite increases. Food and wine become medicine for agony that never stops. Meanwhile, Henry has become obsessively fixated on Anne Boleyn, one of Catherine's ladies-in-waiting. 17 surviving love letters prove his obsession. Constant gifts. He can't think about anything else. Anne keeps saying no. She won't be his mistress. She'll only be his wife. So Henry convinces himself that God never approved of his marriage to Catherine. He asks the Pope for permission to divorce. The Pope says absolutely not. Henry's response? Fine. I'll make my own church. In the early 1530s, Henry breaks England away from the Catholic Church. He declares himself supreme head of a new Church of England, grants himself a divorce, and marries Anne. One man's obsession literally tears a kingdom from a 1,000-year-old church. This is addict logic. If reality won't bend, remake reality itself. September 1533 arrives, and Anne gives birth to a girl, Elizabeth. Henry is devastated. More miscarriages follow. By 1536, his obsession curdles into resentment. On May 19th, 1536, Anne Boleyn is beheaded on charges most historians think were fabricated. 11 days later, Henry marries Jane Seymour. 11 days. The man is speed-running through marriages like he's binge-watching a series he can't stop. October 1537 brings the birth of a son, Edward. Finally. 12 days later, Jane dies from complications. Henry is devastated, but the compulsion continues. Wife number 4, Anne of Cleves, arrives based on a flattering portrait. Henry takes one look and wants out. They divorce within 6 months. Wife number 5, 17-year-old Catherine Howard, catches his eye in 1540. He calls her his rose without a thorn. Then rumours surface of an affair. On February 13th, 1542, Catherine Howard is beheaded. She's about 19 years old. Wife number 6, Catherine Parr, survives by essentially becoming his nurse as his body collapses. By the 1540s, Henry's addictions have consumed him completely. His waist measures over 50 inches. He can barely walk. Servants hoist him around using a mechanical harness, moving him like cargo. The leg ulcer's smell is overwhelming. His temper is terrifying. One wrong word means execution. And the eating never stops. Oysters, multiple soups, fish courses, roasted meats, game birds, elaborate pies, desserts, cheese, fruit, wine. Often eaten alone, in rooms thick with the smell of infection. But here's the most disturbing part. Even as his body falls apart, Henry commissions portraits showing himself at 20. Strong, athletic, powerful. The most famous shows Henry standing with legs apart, looking invincible. In reality, he can barely stand without assistance. The mirror shows truth. The portrait shows the lie. Henry chooses the lie every time. On January 28th, 1547, Henry VIII dies at Whitehall Palace at 55, though his body is ancient. He leaves behind 3 children from 3 mothers, a country torn by religious upheaval, 2 executed wives, and thousands of executed subjects. Here's the truth about Henry VIII. He wasn't addicted to food, or wives, or power individually. He was addicted to consumption itself. When reality didn't match his hunger, he devoured reality and remade it. He broke from Rome because appetite demanded it. He executed wives because appetite required it. He hoarded palaces because appetite is never satisfied. He convinced himself His hunger was God's will, so everything he consumed was righteous. But appetite always wins. The man who commanded armies couldn't command his own body. The king who declared himself head of God's church couldn't escape judgment on his own flesh. He tried to eat the future, and the future ate him back. But if you think consuming everything in reach is disturbing, wait until you meet the queen whose addiction was far quieter and somehow more unsettling. A woman who will spend 40 years wearing only black, who keeps her dead husband's rooms exactly as he left them, with his clothes laid out and his shaving water prepared each morning, who turns grief into a ritual so constant, so all-consuming, that mourning becomes the only way she knows how to breathe. The king who devoured life yields to a queen who will marry death itself. Number 6. Queen Victoria, the queen who married her grief. Every morning at Windsor Castle, a servant walks into a bedroom that hasn't been slept in for 20 years. He pours hot shaving water into a basin, lays out a fresh razor, arranges the prince's clothes on a chair. Everything is perfect. Everything is ready. Except the man this is all for died in 1861. And the woman ordering this ritual is Queen Victoria, ruler of the largest empire on earth. She's been doing this every single day for 40 years. Welcome to a queen whose addiction wasn't to drugs or alcohol. It was to grief itself. Victoria is born in 1819 into a suffocating childhood. She literally sleeps in her mother's bedroom every night until she's 18. Then, in 1837, her uncle dies and boom, she's suddenly Queen of the British Empire at 18 years old. Her first act as queen? Demand her own bedroom. Finally. For 3 years, she rules alone and loves it. Then, in 1840, she marries her German cousin, Prince Albert. That's when the obsession begins. Victoria doesn't just love Albert, she worships him. Her private diary is genuinely embarrassing. Constant entries about how gorgeous and perfect he is. It's obsessed teenager energy. Except this is the Queen of England. But Albert doesn't just love her back. He takes over her entire life. He reorganizes the household, controls her decisions, basically runs the country while she wears the crown. And Victoria lets him. She genuinely believes Albert is better at being queen than she is. 9 children arrive. Government ministers whisper that Albert is really in charge. Victoria ignores it all. Albert isn't just her husband. He's her entire identity. Which means when he dies, she doesn't just lose a person. She loses herself. December 14th, 1861. Albert collapses at Windsor Castle from what doctors call typhoid fever. He's 42. Victoria completely falls apart. When she finally emerges from her room days later, she's dressed head to toe in black. She will wear only black for the next 40 years. Every single day. That's not mourning. That's addiction. But the black clothes are just the start. Victoria orders Albert's rooms preserved exactly as he left them. Servants wind his pocket watch daily. His slippers stay by the bed. His hairbrush on the dresser. And that shaving water? Prepared fresh every morning like he might walk in any moment. This continues for 40 years. She commissions hundreds of portraits and statues, builds the Royal Albert Hall, constructs a massive Gothic monument in Hyde Park that takes a decade to complete. She's trying to make him immortal. Then Victoria basically disappears from public life. She refuses to attend ceremonies, won't open Parliament, won't show her face in London. The British people start calling her the Widow of Windsor, and not kindly. Politicians panic. People openly question whether Britain needs a queen who won't do her job. Victoria doesn't care. She only cares about Albert. She fills notebooks with endless pages about her grief, how empty life feels, how she wishes she could die and join him. This isn't healthy grief. This is grief as a full-time occupation. Then things get bizarre. Victoria becomes convinced she can feel Albert's presence. She starts talking to him out loud, having conversations with empty air. Her ladies-in-waiting hear her asking Ghost Albert for political advice, then making decisions based on what she thinks he would say. She's not just mourning, she's hallucinating companionship. That's when John Brown appears. John Brown is a Scottish servant who treats Victoria like a regular person instead of a grief-stricken queen. Victoria latches onto him completely, and British society loses its mind. Newspapers call her Mrs. Brown. Pamphlets suggest she secretly married her servant. Cartoons show her in his arms, while Albert's ghost watches in horror. This is massive scandal. The Queen of the British Empire, still mourning her perfect dead husband, possibly involved with a Scottish servant. Was it romantic? Nobody knows. Victoria never explains. When Brown dies in 1883, she grieves almost as intensely as she grieved for Albert. She even tries to publish a memoir about him until her horrified family stops her. The woman is addicted to grief. When one source ends, she finds another. By the 1870s, mourning has transformed into rigid ritual. Wake at 7 a.m. Black dress. Visit Albert's rooms at 9 a.m. Write in grief journal at noon. More visits, more prayers. Always black. The routine becomes her only structure. If she follows it perfectly, maybe the grief stays bearable. Her daughters write desperate letters begging her to stop. Please wear grey instead of black. Please stop living in the past. Victoria's response chills them. She already lives with the dead. The living bore her. That's addiction language. That's someone who's replaced reality with compulsion. Slowly, grudgingly, she returns to some duties. 1887. Golden Jubilee. 50 years as Queen. Still wearing black. 1897. Diamond Jubilee. 60 years ruling. The British Empire covers a quarter of Earth. Victoria is grandmother to European royalty. But she's still in mourning. Still visiting those preserved rooms daily. Still treating grief like sacred ritual. Was this love? Or did mourning become her identity, easier than living? Maybe Victoria couldn't tell anymore. January 22nd, 1901. Victoria dies at Osborne House. She's 81, ruled 63 years. But even in death, the ritual continues. Her burial instructions are specific. White dress, not black. But inside her coffin goes Albert's dressing gown, a plaster cast of his hand, his photographs, his letters. She's going to her grave still clutching him, still performing the ritual, still addicted to grief even in death. Here's the truth about Victoria. She didn't just lose her husband. She lost her sense of self. Albert had been her guide, her decision-maker, her identity. Without him, she didn't know who she was. So she became the grieving widow and stayed frozen there for 40 years because grief gave her purpose when nothing else felt real. Mourning became her drug. The daily ritual became the only thing that made sense. She could build 1,000 monuments, prepare his shaving water for decades, wear black until it became her skin. But none of it could bring him back, and none of it let her move forward. The woman who ruled Earth's largest empire couldn't rule her own broken heart. But if preparing daily shaving water for a dead man seems strange, just wait. Up next is a king whose addiction was quieter, but more tragic. A man who tried to think his way to sanity, who believed order could cure a mind coming apart. What happens when the prison is your own head? Number 7. King George III, the king who tried to think himself sane. A servant enters the king's study at Windsor Castle and freezes. His Majesty is standing in the corner, having an animated conversation with a potted orange tree. He's asking it about crop rotations, waiting for an answer, then nodding thoughtfully at the silence. This has been going on for 40 minutes. Welcome to King George III, whose addiction wasn't to wine or women or opium. It was to order itself. The desperate belief that if he could just organize the chaos, count the right things, follow the perfect routine, his mind would stay intact. Spoiler, it didn't work. The more he tried to control reality, the faster reality slipped away. And the truly disturbing part? He never stopped trying. Even when his mind shattered, the compulsion to organize remained. The year is 1738, and baby George is born into a spectacularly dysfunctional royal family. His grandfather barely speaks English. His father is locked in such a bitter public feud with his own parents that it becomes a national scandal. Then, in 1751, his father dies suddenly. 12-year-old George realizes he's going to be king someday, and something hardens in him. A determination. I will be different. Moral, disciplined, in control. The obsession with order begins right here. In 1760, George becomes king at 22. The following year, he marries Charlotte, a German princess he's never met. Against all odds, it works. They'll have 17 children together. 17. The man clearly understands routine and repetition. But here's where George becomes fascinating. Unlike other kings collecting mistresses, George collects clocks, mechanical clocks specifically. He owns dozens, winds them himself, arranges them around his rooms so their ticking creates a symphony of precision. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Order made audible. He also studies chemistry, obsesses over agricultural yields, and plays the harpsichord for hours to calm down. His courtiers find it odd. A king who'd rather discuss pig breeding than palace intrigue? Who spends evenings calculating crop rotations instead of attending balls? But George doesn't care. Structure feels like safety. If every day follows the same pattern, if the numbers all add up, then surely nothing can go wrong. Right? Wrong. In the summer of 1788, George starts talking faster than normal. Then he doesn't stop talking at all. Words pour out in torrents. Sentences spiral into sentences. He speaks for 6, 7, 8 hours straight without pause, his voice growing hoarse, his eyes wild. Then come the letters. George retreats to his study and writes, and writes, and writes. Not normal letters. Endless pages where the same sentence appears 20 times. Where he addresses dead friends as if they're still alive. Where past and present blur together. One letter to a dead minister goes on for 47 pages, discussing policy from 1762 as if it's still current. The handwriting loops over itself. Words written over words. A paper monument to a mind eating itself. Parliament panics. They bring in Dr. Francis Willis, who claims he can cure madness through discipline and force. His treatment is medieval. When George gets agitated, Willis straps him into a straitjacket. When he talks too much, they gag him. Ice baths. Bloodletting. Hours of enforced silence. The idea is simple. Break the madness through sheer willpower and physical punishment. George's family listens through locked doors. His wife and daughters hear him crying, begging to be released, pleading for mercy. I am ill, he keeps saying, but I am not mad. Nobody listens. And here's the heartbreaking part. Even as doctors are restraining him, George tries desperately to maintain his routines. He asks what time it is, begs to know if his clocks are wound, wants to review farm reports. The addiction to order survives even the destruction of the mind that created it. By early 1789, George recovers. Somewhat. The confusion fades. He returns to his duties. But in 1810, his beloved daughter, Princess Amelia, dies at 27. George's mind shatters completely. This time, it never comes back. His son takes over as Prince Regent. George is quietly moved to Windsor Castle, away from public view. His world shrinks to a few rooms. His eyesight fails. His hearing fades. Words tangle in his mouth. But the compulsions never stop. He writes letters to people dead for decades, asking them to attend meetings from 30 years ago. He counts things obsessively. Windows, steps, the number of times servants enter his room. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Order without meaning. Servants find him at strange hours, hands moving through empty air. At first, they don't understand. Then they realize he's playing the harpsichord, an invisible harpsichord, fingers pressing keys that aren't there, playing symphonies only he can hear. Music was always his comfort, his way of creating order from chaos. Now he performs concerts for an audience of ghosts. Sometimes he wanders Windsor's gardens in his nightshirt, talking to the trees, apologizing to the flowers, having full conversations with roses about policy from 40 years ago. Is he apologizing for losing America? For his failed mind? For disappointing everyone? Nobody knows. George is locked in a world where time has collapsed, where the dead are alive, and where only the rituals remain. The man who tried to organize reality has lost his grip on it entirely. But he's still trying, still counting, still writing, still playing invisible music. The addiction outlives the man. On January 29th, 1820, King George III dies at Windsor Castle. He's 81 years old, blind, deaf, lost in a labyrinth of his own mind. He doesn't recognize his family, doesn't remember the 60 years on the throne. The man who valued reason above all else dies without it. But even in his final days, servants find papers covered in shaky handwriting. Lists numbers, attempts at organization that no longer mean anything. Right to the very end, he was still trying to count his way to sanity. Here's what we know. George III was addicted to the illusion of control. He believed that if he could just organize enough details, maintain enough routines, count enough things, the chaos inside his head would submit to order. But minds don't work that way. You can't think yourself sane any more than you can organize yourself into happiness. The harder he gripped, the faster reality slipped through his fingers. His addiction to order became the prison that trapped him. The very thing he thought would save him became the thing that consumed him. The invisible harpsichord plays on in empty rooms. The clocks tick in perfect time. The numbers are all accounted for, but the man is gone. The king who tried to think himself sane fades into history, leaving behind a haunting question. What happens when the person you're trying to control is yourself? But there's no time to answer that, because waiting in the shadows is a queen whose addiction is the opposite of George's chaos. She won't try to organize reality. She'll beautify it, cover every crack with diamonds, every wound with silk, every betrayal with the most elegant performance the Edwardian age will ever witness. She'll smile through 1,000 photographs while her heart breaks in private. She'll turn loneliness into fashion, make suffering look like grace. And nobody, not even her closest friends, will ever see what's hidden beneath the pearls. Number 8. Queen Alexandra, the queen who couldn't stop pretending. A servant enters the queen's dressing room and freezes. It's 4 a.m. Her Majesty has been standing in front of the mirror for 6 hours straight, rotating through pearl necklaces like she's searching for a cure. She's tried 14 different strands, adjusted each one hundreds of times. Her neck is raw from the constant friction, but she reaches for another. The servant realizes with creeping horror that the queen isn't looking at the jewelry anymore. She's staring through her own reflection like it belongs to someone else. This isn't getting dressed. This is something far stranger. Welcome to Queen Alexandra, whose addiction wasn't to drugs or gambling or food. It was to beauty itself, to the performance of perfection, to burying every wound under diamonds until even she forgot what was real. The year is 1844, and Princess Alexandra is born in Copenhagen to a Danish royal family that's basically broke. Fancy titles, but empty pockets. But what Alexandra does have is beauty. Stunning. Stop-you-in-the-street beauty. By her late teens, every eligible prince in Europe wants her. Then, in 1863, Queen Victoria's eldest son needs a wife. Prince Albert Edward, nicknamed Bertie, heir to the British throne, a man already infamous across Europe for gambling, mistresses, and scandal. Alexandra is 18. Nobody tells her this before the wedding. Honestly, they should have. At first, the British public goes wild for her. After decades of stern, black-clad Victoria, here comes this radiant young princess who actually smiles. Alexandra becomes an instant style icon. Whatever she wears, British women copy within weeks. It's intoxicating. For the first time in her life, Alexandra has power, the power to make millions of women want to look like her. She becomes addicted to it immediately. Then reality crashes in. Bertie's first very public affair, and when I say public, I mean spectacularly, humiliatingly. Everyone in London is gossiping about it public. Bertie parades his mistresses through theatres while his 20-year-old wife sits at home. One particularly brutal moment. He brings his mistress to the opera. Alexandra is in the royal box. The mistress is 3 boxes over, dripping in jewels Bertie bought her. Everyone in the theatre watches to see what Alexandra will do. She does nothing. Sits perfectly still, back straight, face serene, diamonds glittering. And that's when the real addiction begins. If she can't control her husband, she'll control her image. She starts wearing high-necked gowns and chokers made of stacked pearls. Later, people realize she's covering a scar from childhood illness. British women immediately copy the look. They're literally copying Alexandra's method of hiding a wound. The irony is devastating. But here's where it gets genuinely strange. Alexandra starts spending 4 to 5 hours getting dressed. Every single day. Her ladies-in-waiting watch in horror as she adjusts the same curl 17 times. Repositions a brooch for half an hour, changes gowns 3 times before breakfast. She collects jewelry obsessively. Mountains of it. Drawers overflowing. She rotates through pieces constantly, as if the right combination might fix something broken inside. Staff find her at 2 in the morning standing in front of mirrors, trying on different tiaras. Just standing there, alone, adjusting. One lady-in-waiting writes in her diary that she found Alexandra having a full conversation with her own reflection, asking it which jewels looked better, then waiting, as if expecting the mirror to answer back. That's not vanity anymore. That's addiction. Then something makes it worse. An illness leaves Alexandra partially deaf. Conversations become impossible to follow. Music fades. Her own children's voices grow muffled. For anyone, this would be devastating. For Alexandra, whose identity is wrapped up in performing perfectly, it's catastrophic. If she can't hear what people are saying, she can't control it. Her response? Make her image even more perfect. If people are gossiping, at least they'll talk about how beautiful she looks while doing it. The deafness isolates her completely, but she turns isolation into mystique, the ethereal queen who floats through rooms like a beautiful ghost. Now, here's where it gets absolutely bizarre. The same illness leaves Alexandra with a slight limp. barely noticeable. British high society's response? They start copying it. I'm not joking. Women across Britain begin faking limps to look like Alexandra. They practice in their bedrooms. It becomes known as the Alexandra limp, an actual documented fashion trend. British aristocrats are literally pretending to be disabled because the Queen looks elegant while doing it. This is peak Victorian absurdity. Worship suffering if it looks pretty. And Alexandra never comments on it, just keeps performing while women fake disabilities in her honor. The whole thing is deeply, deeply strange. In 1901, Bertie becomes King Edward VII. Alexandra is now Queen. The affairs don't stop. Alice Keppel becomes his official mistress, accepted at court events. And here's the shocking part. When Edward lies dying in 1910, Alexandra personally invites Alice Keppel to his deathbed. The Queen invites her husband's mistress to say goodbye. Wife and mistress, standing on opposite sides of his bed. The scandal is nuclear, but Alexandra handles it with icy grace, perfect posture, flawless appearance, because by now, the performance is all she has left. After Edward's death, Alexandra does something eerie. She keeps his rooms exactly as he left them, his clothes laid out, but she adds her own twist. She keeps herself looking exactly as she did at 40. Same hairstyles, same fashion, frozen in time. She lives another 15 years like this, still spending hours adjusting pearls that are already perfect. Servants find her at strange hours in empty rooms, smoothing gowns that don't need smoothing, performing for nobody. When she dies in 1925 at 80, her rooms are filled with mirrors. Dozens of them, all angled to show her best side. Even at 80, Alexandra was still checking the angles, still performing for an audience that existed only in her head. Here's the tragedy. Alexandra was beautiful, kind, did real charity work. But she married a man who humiliated her for 50 years. Her response? Turn herself into a living work of art. Become so perfect that people would focus on beauty instead of pain. But wounds don't heal because you cover them in diamonds. And performing perfection for 60 years doesn't make it real. Alexandra taught women that suffering should be beautiful, that pain should be hidden, that the mask matters more than the face. And we're still learning that lesson, still curating perfect content like YouTube influencers while falling apart behind the camera, still performing happiness while dying inside. The addiction to appearing perfect never ended. Alexandra just showed us how to do it with diamonds instead of ring lights. But Alexandra's obsession with beauty pales compared to what's waiting. A man who believed love could be measured and scheduled. A consort who thought if he organized every detail, corrected every flaw, chaos would submit. What happens when devotion becomes obsession? When the quest for perfection poisons what it was meant to protect? Number 9. Prince Albert, the consort who tried to perfect the world. A servant enters Queen Victoria's private sitting room and freezes. Prince Albert is on his hands and knees, measuring the distance between furniture legs with a ruler. He's been doing this for 2 hours. When the servant coughs, Albert doesn't look up. He makes another mark in his notebook and moves an ottoman 3 inches left. The symmetry was incorrect, he murmurs. Everything must be precise. His hands are shaking. Dark circles under his eyes. He clearly hasn't slept. But he's measuring furniture at 2 in the afternoon, for the 3rd time this week. Welcome to Prince Albert, whose addiction wasn't to wine or gambling or pleasure. It was to perfection itself. The compulsive belief that if he could just control every detail, measure every distance exactly right, the chaos would finally submit. It never did. And the addiction killed him. The year is 1819, and baby Albert is born in Coburg, a tiny German state where discipline gets weaponized into parenting. Strict tutors monitor every moment. Rigid schedules control every hour. Every mistake documented. Every flaw corrected. Most kids would rebel. Albert absorbs it completely and turns it inward. By his teens, something disturbing develops. He can't leave a room unless books are arranged by height. He rewrites letters multiple times if his handwriting isn't perfect. He experiences genuine physical distress when things are out of order. This isn't discipline, this is obsessive compulsion. In 1840, 20-year-old Albert marries his cousin, Queen Victoria. She falls catastrophically. Her diary calls him her angel, her master. She's not just in love, she's worshipping him. Albert sees opportunity. He genuinely believes he can mold Victoria into the perfect queen through systematic improvement. This is a man who thinks love is a quality control problem. And Victoria lets him. She starts asking, what would Albert think, before every decision? Political judgments, personal choices, what she wears. She's handing him the blueprints to her entire existence. Albert immediately reorganizes the royal household like he's invading chaos itself. But he can't stop at reasonable organization. The compulsion takes over. He writes memoranda about everything. The correct angle for arranging flowers. The precise method for folding linens. The proper temperature for serving soup. The exact minutes between dinner courses. One lady-in-waiting finds him at midnight rewriting fire evacuation procedures for the 7th time. The previous 6 versions were perfectly fine, but adequate isn't perfect, and perfect is the only thing that brings peace. His staff are drowning in instructions for tasks that worked fine for centuries. But if there's a variable Albert hasn't controlled, it feels like a wound that won't close. By the mid-1840s, something disturbing is clear. Victoria barely makes decisions anymore. She just asks what Albert would think. He's not her husband, he's her operating system. His letters to her become strange. Less love, more optimization. He criticizes her emotional reactions, provides numbered lists of ways to improve her performance. One letter literally reads like employee feedback. He's debugging his wife like she's software with glitches. The most unsettling part? Victoria thanks him for it. She thinks his constant corrections prove his love. This is how addiction warps relationships. The compulsion becomes normal. Everyone adjusts. But one household isn't enough. In 1851, Albert's perfectionism finds its ultimate canvas, the Great Exhibition. A massive glass palace in Hyde Park, showcasing human progress. Over 1 million square feet. Exhibits from around the world. Behind the scenes, Albert is having a breakdown in slow motion. He reviews all 13,000 exhibit proposals personally, checks every calculation. Staff find him at 3 a.m, surrounded by papers, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling. He's checking measurements he's already verified twice, then checking again. They beg him to sleep. He can't. If something is wrong, his entire structure of order collapses. One night, an assistant makes a tiny calculation error. Nothing important. Albert discovers it and has what witnesses call a fit of distress. He doesn't sleep for 3 days rechecking everything. The exhibition opens to acclaim. 6 million visitors, universal praise. But Albert knows about the minor imperfections only he noticed. To everyone else, it's perfect. To him, it's a monument to failure. The addiction always wins. Even success feels like defeat. By the late 1850s, his compulsion is destroying him physically. Chronic stomach problems, exhaustion, insomnia, shaking hands, weight loss. But he won't rest. His study becomes a shrine to addiction. Papers in perfect stacks, pencils aligned, hours spent alone checking documents that don't need checking. Then November 1861 brings disaster. Their eldest son is caught with an actress during military training. Albert is devastated. He'd organized his son's entire life, created systems, implemented discipline, and chaos won anyway. Despite being seriously ill, Albert travels through terrible weather to confront his son. The conversation is brutal. He returns feverish, shaking. Within 2 weeks, he's dead from typhoid fever. 42 years old. In his final days, as fever burns through him, Albert still tries to organize. He asks for reports, wants documents, tries to give instructions. He's dying and still attempting to perfect the world. His last coherent words are reportedly about a memorandum that needs completing. Not his wife, not his children. Paperwork. After death, servants find his study exactly as he left it. Papers perfectly stacked. Pencils aligned. His final notes are calculations for renovations that won't happen. Instructions no one needs, lists forever incomplete. Even facing death, he couldn't stop. Here's the tragedy. Albert wasn't controlling the world because he loved order. He was terrified of chaos. Every memorandum was armor against disaster. Every measurement was a prayer for stability. Every system was protection from uncertainty. He believed if he organized everything perfectly, nothing bad would happen. That grief could be prevented through planning. That love could be systematized. That death might follow instructions. But you can't schedule away pain. You can't measure yourself into safety. You can't perfect yourself into peace. He spent his life controlling the uncontrollable. And the only thing he couldn't perfect was himself. The prince who measured love by order leaves behind a queen who will turn his memory into her own ritual. But there's one more royal whose addiction is quieter, more methodical, somehow more disturbing. A king who measures life itself in smoke and routine. Who builds his existence around rigid habits until he can't tell where discipline ends and imprisonment begins. What happens when the routine meant to save you becomes the cage you can't escape? Number 10. King George V, the king who measured life in smoke. Dawn light seeps through the palace curtains. A silver case clicks open. The faint scratch of a match. The first breath of smoke curling upward. He exhales softly, watching the morning drift away with it. This is King George V at 6:47 a.m., beginning the ritual that will repeat every hour until bedtime. 20 to 30 cigarettes today. Maybe 25. Maybe 30. But always, always he smokes. For 40 years, the rhythm never changes. Welcome to a king whose addiction wasn't to wine or women or pleasure. It was to habit itself, to the cigarette that marked each hour, to the belief that if he followed the same pattern every single day, chaos would stay outside the palace walls. The year is 1865, and baby George is born second in line to the throne, basically a spare heir, not the main one. His older brother gets groomed for kingship. George gets shipped to the Royal Navy at 12 years old, where every minute is scheduled and every task exact. For someone who finds peace in knowing what comes next, naval life is heaven. Then, in January 1892, his brother dies suddenly from pneumonia. George is 26. Overnight, he becomes heir to the British throne. His response? Grip routine even tighter. And that's when the serious smoking begins. In 1893, George marries Princess Mary of Teck, who was supposed to marry his dead brother. Awkward, but they're perfect for each other. Both quiet, both serious, both completely obsessed with routine. And George's cigarette habit intensifies. First one with breakfast, one every single hour throughout the day. multiple during stress, one before bed without fail. The smoking isn't about enjoying tobacco, it's about marking time, creating little anchors when everything else feels uncertain. By 1910, George becomes king at 45. Most new kings redecorate and make changes. George does the opposite. He turns the monarchy into a military operation. Wake at 6:45 a.m. every single day. First cigarette at 6:47 a.m. Breakfast at 7:30 exactly, not 7:29 or 7:31. If dinner finishes at 7:58 p.m., servants literally stand there holding dirty plates for 2 minutes, waiting for 8 p.m. before clearing the table. His private secretary discovers George's daily schedule varies by less than 5 minutes most days. For decades. That's not discipline. That's compulsion. And the cigarette smoking becomes genuinely disturbing. Palace staff count the butts. 25 one day, 32 the next. Never fewer than 20. He lights cigarettes during government meetings, while reading, while walking, while eating breakfast. Here's the really strange part. Sometimes George lights a fresh cigarette before finishing the previous one. Staff find ashtrays full of half-smoked cigarettes, stubbed out and abandoned because he already lit the next one. It's not about nicotine. It's about the ritual. The moment his hand reaches for that silver case, the scratch of the match, the first inhale that tells his anxious brain everything is still controlled. Doctors warn him. "Your Majesty, you have chronic bronchitis. Your lungs are getting destroyed." George's response? He lights another cigarette during the medical consultation. Then 1914 brings the First World War, and George's ordered world collapses. Millions dying, empires crumbling. His own German relatives become Britain's enemies. George can't control the war, so he controls what he can. His schedule, his cigarettes. He maintains exact meal times while battlefields flood with blood. Smokes at precise intervals while cities burn. Keeps every routine intact while the world tears itself apart. In 1917, he renames the royal family. Out goes the German-sounding House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. In comes the English-sounding House of Windsor. One of the most significant royal decisions in centuries. His diary entry that day mentions it in one sentence, then notes the precise time he finished lunch and whether it rained. By the 1920s, his diary becomes obsessive documentation. Not feelings or thoughts, just cold facts. Rained. Saw minister at 3 p.m., dinner 8 p.m., bed 11 p.m. That's a full day's entry covering 24 hours of a king's life. The man writes like a robot because feeling actual emotions is terrifying. And through it all, the cigarettes. Constant, reliable. The one thing that never disappoints. His eldest son will rebel and give up the throne for love. His second son will inherit terrible anxiety and a stammer from being raised by a human metronome. By the 1930s, George's body is failing. Chronic bronchitis becomes emphysema. Awful breathing. Coughing fits that leave him gasping and spitting blood. Still he smokes. 20 cigarettes minimum daily, often 30. One doctor begs, "Your Majesty, you must stop or it will kill you." George's response is brutally honest. "I can't." The addiction isn't physical anymore. It's existential. The cigarette marks each hour. Without it, time loses meaning. If he stops, what fills those moments? Silence? The realization that 40 years of routine hasn't kept chaos away? Better to keep smoking. January 1936. King George V is dying. Even on his deathbed, the routine persists. Physicians visit at scheduled times. Meals arrive precisely. His final words are reportedly, "How is the empire?" Not his family. The empire. Duty until his last breath. He dies on January 20th, 1936, at 11:55 p.m., 5 minutes before midnight. Even his death runs on schedule. Here's the truth about King George V. He wasn't addicted to cigarettes. He was addicted to the illusion of control. Every cigarette was a ritual marking time. Every routine was armor against unpredictability. Every scheduled moment was proof that if he followed the pattern, everything would stay manageable. But you can't schedule away anxiety. You can't smoke yourself into peace. George built a kingdom from punctuality and tobacco smoke. He kept the monarchy stable through World War. But the cost was a life measured in cigarette intervals. A king who couldn't tell where discipline ended and prison began. From kings who ruled by appetite to queens who ruled by sorrow, from princes drowning in mirrors to monarchs measuring life in smoke, one truth remains. Even the greatest crowns cannot cure the hungers they hide. The clocks still tick in perfect time. The diaries document every day in mechanical detail, but the man who lived by habit died wondering if he'd ever truly lived at all. So sleep well, dear dreamer, and remember, sometimes the routines we build to protect ourselves become the very cages we cannot escape.